on demand. So I'll now turn it over to Bobby.
Okay, thank you, Pat. So we'll start off with just talking about the submission process overall for papers. So obviously you all should review the call for papers at the IMS2024 website, which has all the information really you need to answer a lot of these questions in terms of the specifics of what's needed to submit a paper. I advise you, those of you particularly who are from industry, to make sure that you have you secure all of the approvals needed in order to submit your papers early on. And then download the appropriate paper template. So there's templates for preparing your papers at the IMS website in either a LaTeX or Word format, whichever your preference is. And then, spend some time writing the paper. We're looking for original contributions, primarily ones that show an advancement in technology or the state of the art. And you want to take the time to be very clear, very quantitative in terms of the content of your paper. One of the important aspects of the review process is that it's double blind. So the submissions should be anonymous, in that the reviewers who review your papers are anonymous, as well as the authors of the paper. So you do not want to have your names or affiliations on the paper. You do not want to reference your own work in a way that makes it clear who you are. So you want to do references in the third person. You want to leave acknowledgments out of the initial submission so that it's truly double blind. And the IMS website, you create an account. There's a very detailed process that guides you through, that you can look at, that shows you step by step how you upload your paper. After you've uploaded it, you can make modifications to it up until the deadline, which is December 5th. Okay, so we can go into more detail later with specific questions, and I'll hand over maybe to Dalma to talk about the next item.
Thanks, Bobby. So when you go to the website and you have your paper ready to submit, you can also indicate that you wish to be considered for a number of different paper competitions that are part of IMS. And this is a summary of the 4 different categories that we have. The first one is a student paper. If you are a student author, at the time of submitting your paper, and also to be eligible, you also need to be a student at the time of presenting your paper. If the paper is accepted, you can apply for that competition. There are also paper competitions for those authors who are coming from industry. There's an industry paper competition, and again, you indicate that through the website when you submit your paper. There is also a competition on advanced practices. This is related to a particular type of design technique or some other type of technology that is a further development that is defined as an advanced practice. And again, you can indicate that. And then finally, in 2023, there was a new paper competition introduced, and that's going to be continuing next year. This is the early career paper competition. This is really to recognize submissions from young professionals. So if you are from industry or from government, or if you are a postdoc, for example, in academia, and within 10 years of your final degree, then you qualify to be considered for this competition. And again, you can indicate that when you submit your paper through the website.
Okay. Thanks, Dalma. So Pat, you want to take over?
Yeah, so we have some questions that were submitted already. What advice do you have for writing a successful industry paper? I understand there's no marketing or product push being done, but is a TPC receptive to a design story from industry?
So I guess I'm happy to take that. So the requirements for an industry paper are essentially the same for any paper, in that it needs to be original work that demonstrates an advancement in some state of the art, whether it's design, implementation, results. And so the papers are not for marketing or product advertisement, but really to show an advancement of the state of the art. It's going to be reviewed in the same process along with other papers from other sectors, including academia and government. And so it needs to kind of rise to that standard where it is demonstrating, clearly a contribution to the field that is new or impacting in some way.
So you mentioned originality. The next one is, I would like to inquire about the details of the requirement for originality on a technical paper. I'd like to understand if the required that the IP presented in the submission not be previously disclosed. For example, is there another paper as a component of a larger system, which is a high-level description of the IP that is given?
So let me try and answer that, because there's a lot in that particular question. So because it's very specific, talking about IP, I think the key point is that this does have to be original, and that the content should not be previously published in any type of other publication that is already in print or online. And so what goes in there with respect to the content does have to be new. And I would describe it more in that context rather than talking about the IP associated with that. Now, if what you're describing is new, but it perhaps is part of a bigger system that has been published elsewhere, but the actual details of what you are showing in there has not been published before, then that is certainly considered to be original content.
Great. And maybe if you could describe some of the formatting about what goes on what page. It says, can we have figures on the second half of the fourth page, or only acknowledgements and references allowed on that page? And how about the other pages? Maybe you could describe the format.
Sure. So this is actually an important point, and one that I think we can admit is maybe a little bit confusing from different sources you've seen from the call of papers or the website. And the format of the papers have changed over the years for IMS, but effectively the page, you're limited to a 4-page submission, and there is, I should mention that there is also the opportunity to have the papers printed, published in a special edition of the Microwave and Wireless Technology letters. And so the papers have to adhere to that particular format for the letters, which is a 4-page paper where the last column, the second column of the 4th page, must only contain acknowledgments or references. Okay. You'll see at other call for papers that it says 3 pages with the 4th for references. We will clean this up, but in the different places where it's published. But all of the papers should really adhere to the MWTL formatting is what we would like to see for IMS. That is, it's a 4-page paper where the second column of the final page, the 4th page, will only be the acknowledgments and references. So that means the first column can be used for technical content.
Great. Yeah, that clears it up a lot. Are there any tips or tricks that you can give us when coming up with figures and graphs for the papers?
So I think one of the criteria in terms of the evaluation process is about the clarity and the technical quality of the paper. So what I would propose with respect to putting your figures in, first of all, is they should be very clearly be able to be reproduced so that the reviewers can see them and there are no ambiguities in what is shown there, but also that the figure captions are as detailed as possible and really make it clear what is being shown in that particular figure or graph. I think that's very important. Sometimes papers can be submitted where the figure is really difficult to understand in terms of what data is actually being shown there. So making it as clear as possible is very important.
lots of labels, large enough font that you can clearly read what you're looking at. Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to repeat something I heard in a previous session, that the figures should also kind of tell a story. And so they should be, methodically mapped out, and someone should be able to kind of follow what's going on just from looking at the figures. So
And the
keep that
caption
in
should
mind.
also be informative. So the captions for the
Right.
figures can tell the story and should be very clear about what people are looking at in the figure.
Okay, next question. Is it possible to extend the selected paper before the conference takes place in June? How many pages are allowed in the extended paper?
So I guess the short answer is no. The papers appearing in the proceedings will be the formatting that we discussed, 4 pages, where the last column of the 4th page can only be references and acknowledgments. So for the conference itself, for the proceedings, there is not a opportunity to extend the length of the papers. However, I should point out that there are 2 other opportunities to publish this work. There will be a special issue, as I mentioned, of the microwave wireless technology letters, which you can submit your paper for consideration to that journal when you submit your original paper. It will not be extended in terms of the length of the paper. It has to follow that formatting, but it will undergo a second review. That it will go through the technical program review committee review that all papers submitted to IMS undergo. And that will be a first step in whether a paper should be considered for MWTL. And then those that are forwarded to MWTL will undergo a second review by the editorial board of MWTL for final acceptance of the final papers for that special edition. There is also you can submit an extended version of your paper, which means it has to have more content, extended content, for a special edition of Microwave Theory and Technology Journal, which is an opportunity to extend your work and publish a longer paper. But it's not at IMS proceedings. It'll stick with 4 pages.
And we should also just remind everyone that, in fact, you will be submitting 2 versions of your paper. Yep. The first one on the 5th of December, which is compliant with the double-blind preparation guidelines, and then the second one, which the submission date is the 8th of March next year, and that is when you submit your final version, where you do have the authors and the institutions put in, and you make sure that you can put your acknowledgements in, and your references don't have to comply to the double blind anymore. So there will be 2 versions of the paper that you submit.
And the final version should not differ substantially from what was reviewed, although you may receive feedback which would give you some guidance as to things to update in the paper, or if it was accepted. So.
Great. I think you covered the submission date and time, which was another question, so that's great. Next one was, so can you explain the double-blind review process?
So I just wanted to, before Bobby says something, the double-blind process is actually very important. This has been something that's been done at IMS for over a decade now, and it's really about removing bias in the review process. And this is very important. As an author, you have the right to expect that your paper is being reviewed without any bias attributed to who you are or where your institution is. So that is really about making sure that the conference does its review process in the most fair and impartial way. Bobby, you wanted to say something?
Sure. So I think, yes, that is the purpose and rationale for the double blind. And I think I kind of mentioned a little bit kind of the process. So in terms of the submitted paper, you want to make sure there is no reference that would reveal who the authors are, the institution. So you will not, on the submitted version of the paper, have the authors' names or affiliation. You should not include acknowledgments, which might indicate who you are. The references should be complete. It's very common to reference your own work in papers. Obviously, you might be advancing something you've done in the past, but when you refer to those references, that is your own work or your co-author's work, you need to do it in such a way that it does not indicate that you're the author of the paper that's been presented. So it should be done in the third person, done anonymously, as opposed to something like, in 1925 or so, we demonstrated something, right? Something like that. So you don't want to refer to yourselves. It needs to be in the third person. The review, the TPRC as well, in a sense is anonymous as well, the makeup of those committees. So it's double blind in that sense.
Okay, next question. What's the process to post a submission?
Process to post a submission. So I think
the submission process.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of what we referred to in slide 3, right? So maybe we can go back real quick to that. Is that you definitely need to visit the IMS 2024 website. It's full of detail on the process. There is a very detailed write-up on step-by-step process you would go through to submit your paper. And it shows you kind of the screenshots. You have to set up an account. You need to submit an abstract that's separate from the one on the paper. You need to select one of the technical review committee subcommittees that is related to the topic your paper's about, so that we can direct it to the proper subcommittee for review. So all of that is part of the submission. So I would invite you to go to the IMS website and take a look at that, because there is a step-by-step guide that helps you through that with all the details.
Yeah, it's actually 20 pages long, I think.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of detail in there. And you do also have the opportunity to select more than one topic category as well when you submit your paper. So it may go to an alternate, technical review subcommittee in order to review your paper, depending on the content itself.
Yeah, the content, as well as evening out the number of papers the different committees have to review. So.
Okay, can you share with us a review of the criteria that IMS 2024 paper submissions go through?
Sure. You want to go, Dalma?
Oh, well, so basically there are 4 key things here. Originality, Bobby's talked extensively about that. That's very important. Quantitative content. So this is really about, is there adequate information in there that underpins and verifies what you're postulating in your paper. So that has to be data, measurements, and simulated data, if also relevant. Don't underestimate the importance of making sure that your paper is as clear as possible. It's presented in a logical manner. There are no typos in your paper, and as we talked about before, the figures really need to be clear and understandable, and almost stand alone in the way that they're presented. And obviously, interest to the membership. I mean, MTT has many different technical communities covering a lot of different topics. So it actually is very diverse, and I think that you will find that there will be a particular community, a subcategory that is relevant to what you're preparing.
Yeah, we have 32 different technical categories for papers. So you want to find the one that is closest to your work. If it's something that doesn't fit well, that might be a good indication that you might want to consider a different conference for it if it doesn't fit in one of those subcategories.
Although we do actually also have a topic on emerging technologies, so your paper may be relevant to that.
True.
So talking about relevancy, next question. I've implemented a circuit at 100 gigahertz with state-of-the-art performance with a topology known for sub-6 gigahertz. Is IMS the right place for this type of submission?
I would say the topical area, yes. The frequency range is of interest. It sounds like it is an extension of a prior art to perhaps a new frequency regime. So from that general description, it is, I would say an appropriate topic for IMS. I think the one thing, as Dalma emphasized, is that you want to make sure that it is not a relatively straightforward implementation of something that doesn't really extend the state of the art or is not a unique contribution. So that it would be on the onus of the author to really explain how this extension was unique, original, or not trivial, and how it is impacting. So those would be important things to bring out in the narrative of the paper to describe that work.
Okay, I think we've answered all the questions here. So I'd like to thank Dalma and Bobby for talking with us today about the paper submission process. As a reminder, papers are due December 5th, and go to the ims.ieee.org. Submissions, that's ims-ieee.org. And you can submit your paper there. And if you have any questions, you can always contact people online. And we thank everybody for watching today.
Thank you. Hope to see you in DC next year.
Yes. Thanks, everyone.